to send all kind of
Good evening, Earth.
agents.
This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Medusa's crown. Alright, tonight the next step on this is going to be a phthalo blue 50-50 with phthalo green thin glaze across all of the background faces in order to unify them, deepen the tone, add another layer of light absorption, and prep it for the next layer of highlights. So here we go.
As well, but you're referring to these pagers that, I don't know, what is it? It was hundreds of people, right? Were affected.
Hundreds of people lost their organs. Not hundreds of people were killed, but hundreds of people lost their hands, their legs, God knows.
Yeah.
In Israel, it's a source of pride. And you know, as an Israeli, who cares about Israel? It makes me worry because this is not a healthy atmosphere to live in. When you are so proud about assassinations or about this call page, how do you call the beepers? Page call?
Yeah, the pagers, yeah.
The pagers. Where does it lead us to? What will be remembered from us? That we
Didn't Yeshayahu Leibowitz exactly paint where it leads to?
Yeah. But who listened to it? You read today what he said, it's word by word what he had foreseen, and in many ways it's getting worse. And Leibowitz was really, they demonized him, they humanized him, ridiculized him, and look what a giant. He was a real biblical prophet. But
we should just be clear for people who don't know his work.
Yeah.
He talked about the poison of occupation and what it would do internally to Israel, to its respect for human rights, its democracy, by essentially training a population to be prison guards and undercover agents and assassination squads. And of course he was stunningly prophetic.
And we are dealing with an Orthodox Jew, a great intellectual, who paid the price for those positions. But we are so far away. I mean, today you can hardly. Today, if there was a label which nobody would even listen to him and nobody would even cover what he says. At least then, whenever he spoke, he was in the media. There was some respect to what he says. Today, he will be totally dismissed.
How do you see? It's very dangerous to predict anything given the mercurial nature of the Trump administration, but where do you see the conflict going? The Iranians have twice negotiated in the 12-day war last June. Their negotiating teams have been assassinated. The moderates have been assassinated. I think the message has been delivered clearly to the Iranians that there are no exits, that they at this point must inflict as much pain as possible. Many people argue that it doesn't really matter what Trump or Netanyahu want. The Iranians are going to make their adversaries pay, and of course asymmetrically through crippling the regional and the global economy. Where do you see it going?
So first of all, it depends much on the capabilities of the Iranians. Not only on their ambition. Sure, Iran will want to take revenge and power, but the question is if they will have the capability, because still they are beaten now. It's not something that they will recover within a few weeks or months to the same power. And the question is, for the long run, first of all, they will have to make their choice if they want to continue with the same regime, the same policy. I'm not sure this regime is so good for Iran. I'm not sure.
No.
And therefore, it's really about them to decide. Because between liberal democracy and this fundamentalistic regime, there is a large scope. And they can change also, gradually, not only in a revolution of one day become Norway or Denmark. They can also go gradually. And it depends much on them now. We are still facing a good chance that a war like we face now will repeat itself in 1-2 years again. And as it seems now, this is the most probable scenario. And this will not make people think, why do we do those wars if it leads us to repeat them again and again? Why not to try something else? Why not to give diplomacy a chance? But you can whistle in the darkness, not much more than it. Same with the Palestinians. I believe that any of those conflicts could have been solved by diplomacy. Finally, we are dealing with human beings. In our side, in the other side, everything could have been solved with diplomacy. I don't believe that war is inevitable. I really don't believe so. I know I sound maybe disconnected from reality, but I know one thing, we never really tried.
But do you see that kind of a change? I mean, Israel seems to become more messianic by the minute. The settlers have seized control in a way that was not true when I was in Israel, within the military, within, of course, the government, within the secret services. The settlers were always pariahs. One sees Israel not drifting towards a government that would embrace diplomacy, but becoming more and more fanatic.
Absolutely, and therefore I'm so skeptical and pessimistic. I can't see any scenario in which Israel changes its policy, because the problem is that it's not about the leadership. It's not now about the people. And the majority of Israelis support wars, support apartheid, support occupation, and don't want to see any change, and don't believe in any change. So it's far beyond who is going to replace Netanyahu. We have a problem with people who reach the point in which it's becoming more militaristic than ever, more religious than ever, more messianic than ever. And those processes are very hard to stop.
Are those processes suicidal for Israel?
I don't want to sound too dramatic. I mean, suicidal. I never thought that the question if Israel will exist was ever a relevant question. The only question is what kind of Israel? And Israel can turn into a place that neither you nor me will want to have anything with it. Israel will exist, be strong, and I guess that any American administration will still not lose totally Israel, even though I'm sure the support will be decreasing dramatically, as I say. But the question is, what for? I mean, if we turn into, there are still wonderful islands in Israel, please. Wonderful people which really, I can just be amazed how they all still stay here, even though some are leaving. But they are really wonderful islands. They are a minority and they are delegitimized, unfortunately. And the tendency is a very negative one, demographically and politically and socially. You see how things are getting worse and worse and worse. The settlers take over, the Orthodox take over, the army that I was fighting against decades ago is much worse army now, with all the settlers in all kind of high positions. And the government is a real fascist government. You can't find any other word. But you see all the other systems, the legal system, the education system. You see how system after system, they change. How do you stop it? I wish I knew. We don't have the leadership for this, and we don't have the people for this.
Well, your voice, I mean, you can't discount, for those of us on the outside, how important you are, Amir Haas and a few others. I mean, that's where hope is. And I lived in Israel. I was overseas for 20 years. I'm fiercely critical of the genocide and the apartheid. And however, and this reminds me when you talk about these islands, the closest friends I made were actually Israeli, left-wing Israelis, but Israeli. And they were literate and they had a conscience, as you do, and they had the courage to speak out. So yes, so that's, whatever flickers of hope, that's where they lie. Thank you, Gideon. And I want to thank Sophia, Thomas, and Max, who produced the show. You can find me at chrisedges.substack.com.
Until the present day, it really is as though, from a planetary point of view, what has happened.
I'm going to mix up a little yellow for the moon as well.
Called the human
Settle down to
species was deputized into an information gathering mode sent out.
And that fresh glaze kind of put a sheen across it that makes it impossible to see what I just did, but that's okay. I'll
kind of
move the
epicenter
light.
of the social environment to cognize the organization of the natural world through a process called human history, or the historical advance of understanding toward sufficiently complete modeling of the ground that closure could occur. And that is now, I think, what is happening, that the human species, which was deputized for Gaia, into the fall into profane time, the time of non-participation in the immediacy of the Tao, through a series of successive linguistic declensions. That's what it was. I mean, this begins to sound almost biblical, because what we're saying is there's a fall, and the fall is somehow related to a confusion of languages, not one from another, but from the object of experience. And as the language became less and less natural, the world of the species using this language became less and less natural, because the evolution of symbols became moved toward the abstract, became the realization of ideals. Notice that as early as Platonic philosophy, in a nutshell, even in pre-Socratic philosophy, you get the enunciation of abstractions, great overweening concepts which subsume large sets of particulars underneath them. And this ability to subsume the particulars under a name, which is a class name, is the beginning of this process of replacing the natural language with the symbolic structures that then interfere between soul and nature. The reason for this process we can really only guess at. It seems as though nature requires this reflection upon itself, that the completion of nature is somehow in the hands of a single target species, which acts as an enzyme within the global organism of Gaia. From the point of view of an extraterrestrial looking down on the surface of the planet, there are not discrete organisms. There is simply a gene swarm, and through transmission of viruses and numerous non-genetic ways in which genes are transformed, the previously imagined sharp declensions between species are actually somewhat illusory. So that really, within the confines of my body, the unfolding of gene expression and the molecular assembly of enzyme systems and proteins and that sort of thing is simply under a tighter regimen of control than are the same kind of processes which are going on between people. We are really a loosely regulated organism that has a tendency to ever tighten the control between its subunits, so that you can see the evolution of language, the evolution of technology, and its being at the service of media, the rise of cities, oral poetry. All of these things, we seem to strive for greater and greater cohesion, greater and greater free flow of thought among ourselves. And what we're looking toward is a moment when the artificial language structures which bind us within the notion of ourselves are dissolved in the presence of the realization that we are a part of nature. And when that happens, the childhood of our species will pass away, and we will stand tremulously on the brink of really the first moments of coherent human civilization. And when that happens, the noise which haunts our social systems, our inability to couple things together so that they work, will begin to evaporate. This, I think, is already beginning to happen. It's a slow process, but it's a kind of cascading phenomenon such that once it begins to happen, it happens faster and faster. And the mirroring of psyche that was always the glamour, if you will, which stood behind nature, is correctly perceived with greater and greater clarity as this process proceeds. And this correct perceiving of nature's relationship to self and language is the essence.
Alright, moving the lamp helped a touch, but still a pretty rough sheen. Try and get a nice clean photo of it for the cover. But anyway, that gets a nice heavy layer of glaze, some good light absorption happening, and preps it for the next layer of highlights, which will make those faces much more dramatic. Also redid the moon, which is now glowing happily. So that's it for the moment. Thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Medusa's crown. Have a good night, Earth.